Sure. It's a utility that does everything from generation, transmission, distribution, all the way. So they're making the power, they're bringing it, you know, at the high voltage, stepping up the power voltage to the transmission voltage, stepping it down to distribution voltage, bringing it all the way to your house and owning the meter. So just controlling all that thing. In many markets, you know, even in places that you think of as relatively politically conservative, in places that you wouldn't think of necessarily as progressive in an environmental sense, they've broken up these different pieces. And what you do is you'll have a government body inserted in various places to kind of, you know, watch over it, either from a technical or a policy, you know, more policy-making sense. And then the other pieces are competed. And so the trick is in any context is figuring out, you know, whether it makes sense to have competition in any of those different chunks, or whether it is a natural monopoly. But, you know, but having a vertically integrated natural monopoly is a totally different story than having, for instance, a monopoly in transmission and distribution, or what we call like a wires company. So somebody would potentially own all the wires.
Just to clarify really quick, when you're talking about Abercrombie's plan and, you know, this kind of third party to examine and be the, you know, independent, objective administrator of who comes onto the grid, he was calling that the Hawaii Energy Authority, and that could take shape in some way that is that third party. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Shannon?
As someone who is very interested in this issue and has been tracking it for quite some time, one of the things I'm very much aware of is the internal fights amongst the renewable energy conveyors. For example, there are people on Lanai who absolutely want to kill wind power, and there are other people supporting biofuels, and, you know, and fighting the ag people and so forth. I would, as an outsider who wants to support renewable energy, get off fossil fuels, I don't want to get involved in your battles. How are you guys going to resolve your conflicts? The other big issue with solar is the fact that though 48% of the people on Oahu cannot work with you because we're renters, and the law doesn't allow renters to get the tax credits, and it actually punishes the landlords if we go out and buy it ourselves, because it bumps up their property taxes.
Okay,
yeah, but the first one is how are you going to resolve these conflicts internally so that we can support wind power, but you've got people in Lanai and Molokai who hate you.
Is this something you guys are saying? Is this a real issue?
Yeah, I'll try to speak to that. So we as a company, first of all, just to back up one step, we have the wind farm on Maui that's currently operating, right? We're building one in Kahuku, hopefully one on the North Shore in Kawailoa. We're just starting with that one, a 70 megawatt project. But Molokai has been an ongoing project that we have. Now, Castle and Cook has Lanai. First Wind is trying to develop on Molokai. The only way I can really speak to that, from 2006, First Wind as a company has been working with the Molokai community. And that is where fundamentally the conversation should start. We continue to talk with them. You'll notice you see some things in the media with Lanai. I'm not saying it's smooth sailing on Molokai, but we do have support there. But my role coming to the company has been a voice for the community. All they know is that the power generated there is coming to the beast called Oahu. And so I feel as though my role with the company is simply to be a voice of the community. There has to be substantial benefit for the people of Molokai, which includes the utility, because ultimately they want cheaper rates for their energy, and you don't blame them. So that's something, a commitment that has to be stepped forward by the utility if this project goes forward. They're also asking for green energy for Molokai. Why should it only come to Oahu? So that is something that we as a company should be able to address. But again, what I'm getting at is there is support despite all that you might hear externally. But the challenge is trying to bring all these different factors, the state, the utility, us as the developer together, to come through with these benefits for Molokai. I can only speak to Molokai, I'm sorry.
Mark,
I actually don't think that there are a lot of conflicts within the renewable energy group. I mean, you know, so for instance, if I was ultra self-interested as a solar guy, I would be saying, well, we don't want this cable. It's, you know, I don't know what, it's terrible for whales or whatever I could think of, because then there's more market share for the solar industry if we don't have to deal with the, you know, all the wind coming over. and you don't see any of that type of stuff. And I think that's because we all know that, even if that fight is coming someday, we're way better off hanging together and trying to get, this more fundamental change, against, frankly, a common opponent, which is the utility on this stuff. And so what you have in other places, for instance, like Colorado, there's a huge issue between the big solar developers that do utility scale stuff and the ones that do the roof-mounted stuff. And they literally fight like enemies there. And so, what you have here is nothing like that on the solar side, but not even anything like that between the absolute largest intermittent renewable power producers, which is these guys, and us, which cover the gamut from larger utility scale solar stuff, but all the way down to the smallest system anybody's going to put on their house, and we're all on the same side in all of this type of stuff. So I think clearly there are issues between specific projects in the community, but within the renewable energy kind of group, it's remarkable the lack of dissension, even though you can you can sort of graft onto this, not in an exact overlap of economic interest. So, on your other question about the renter thing, you're exactly right. I mean, the fact that as far as the residential rooftop penetration of solar water heating and of in the future it's going to be the same thing with PV. I think the issue is absolutely this landlord-renter incentive mismatch, and I think that you have people worried about the cost, but on the solar water heating side, I think that affects some people, but it's not nearly responsible for the kind of lack of solar water heating that we see, and some people don't think it looks nice and whatever else, but the fundamental thing I think is this renter owner kind of thing, and that's where the policy on that particular area needs to head is in figuring out how to get rental occupied properties kind of viable for distributed renewable generation.
Senator Hooser has a question in the back.
Yeah, just real quick, Mark, I wanted to clarify. Someone had asked earlier about what public policy changes possibly could be made, and I think I heard you say that the independent power authority was the single most important item that people should put their focus on. Is that what you were saying? In terms of a Capital Watch perspective, a private citizen, lots of issues, is that what we should focus on?
I mean, pending seeing the form of that thing, pending seeing the final form of it. I mean, something with that headline, may not be great, but something with that title, if filled in appropriately, yes, I'm saying from electricity, that would be the single most important thing to worry about. Absolutely.
Are there other communities, states, or nations that are examples of models that we could look at to say, it's working here, here, or here, and here's how it works?
There definitely are. As I say, it depends on the scale of the thing, but some places are much more aggressive. There's, the Scandinavian countries have done a lot with wind. Texas, again, is a fully deregulated market that's in some sense a world model, and they didn't quite go first. They went just far enough behind everybody else to engineer out a lot of the problems, and the cost of power has gone down as they've built the type of transmission infrastructure that the U.S. is figuring out, as a country, is figuring out if they can afford it all to deal with wind. And so you also have things like metropolitan Tokyo or Shanghai are developing these smart utility grids, smart water systems. All of these things that we say, oh, it's too far off, it's too futuristic. A lot of places have just rolled up their sleeves and gotten on with it. In terms of what the optimal mix is and how you would do it here, I think there's definitely some more thinking to be done. But what I'm saying is we don't want to leave that thinking to the utility. We need to have somebody else, some other entities involved in it, and have an honest conversation about what the right form of that thing should be. And so, for instance, what a lot of places are doing is what?
Briefly.
Okay, let's take like a minute. So what a lot of places are doing as a way to integrate more distributed renewable energy onto the utility grids is they're figuring out how to put some kind of storage source, whether it's a battery, flywheel, whatever it is, onto the grid itself. And then you sort of buffer a whole feeder circuit, this like a little chunk, right? what the utilities are doing here is they're making these guys put like 5 times as much storage as they actually need onto their projects, which undermines the economics like crazy, which, what happens? The ratepayers just pay more. So it's not, well, anyway. So you undermine the economics, and so, why is that the right answer? If you could spend less overall, make that apply to more, make it possible for more individual homes, businesses, independently developed projects to interconnect by siting this stuff on the grid instead of doing it this way. And there's a lot of these kind of decisions that it's like, should we have a smart grid or not? Well, what kind of smart grid? Is it the kind of smart grid that makes it possible, that makes it harder to interconnect this stuff and easier to manage the utility assets? Or should it be the kind that encourages more independent power producers and distributed renewables, this type of thing? So anyway, I think the answer to your question is actually none of this stuff is anywhere near impossible. And the final piece is, if you ask KIUC, HECO's objections are always, we're a small island grid, we can't do it. And if you go to Kauai and you ask them to do it, they say, isn't this hard? You're a smaller island grid. And they say, well, no, we have engineers and we're going to give it a try. And if it doesn't work, then we'll try something else. So it's just purely economics.
You guys want to give 10-second closing remarks?
I'll start. I just wanted to thank you once again to the Sierra Club, and just to say what Kahu mentioned earlier, He Hawaii'o, that should be a model that all of us in this room can take out to the general populace. Thank you.
Yep. So, thank you also, and I think you're all on the right track by as Senator Hooser said at the beginning, like making politicians understand that there's a sense of urgency behind this stuff by showing up to stuff and feeling a sense of urgency yourself and encouraging that among your friends and neighbors. Thanks.